In today's video, I'm going to show you how to use triads to understand modes. So this is going to be really cool. And I have a little loop that I created here, actually a couple loops. And I'm going to go ahead and just demonstrate what I'm talking about here. I'm going to start off playing a couple of the modes. We're only doing the basic modes today, the church modes. The Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian modes. But I want to give you a little example. Here's the loop. Hopefully you're enjoying this. If you are, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. So I kind of wanted to come up with what I feel is like the easiest way of understanding modes here. And the way I'm doing it is I'm just figuring out the a couple of the chords from the parent keys of the modes. So I started off in E major, like this. And I'm taking the 4 and the 5 chord, which would be an A and a B. Back to the E. An E chord here, A chord, and a B chord. And I'm droning it over the E, over an E major chord. So while this E on the loop is playing, I'm thinking we'll have an A major and have a B major also. Back to the E again. So, you know, in the key of E, you have the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord. So you have E is the 1 chord, and the 4 chord is A, because you have E, F, G. No, the 4 chord is A, that's right. E, F, G, A, and then B. So you have a 1, 4, 5. So the beauty of this is that you can really understand the flavor of the modes by thinking of the simple 1, 4, 5 progression in the modes. So check this out. So here's the basic major scale. Right? So that's just the E major scale. Then you have the A and the B. So by playing those 3 chords, I know that it's E major. There's no question about it right there. Because I'm emphasizing the A, emphasizing the B over this E chord. So if there was music going on and there's an E in the background, and you were to play an A and a B, you'd know, everybody would know, that you're in the key of E major and it's an Ionian mode. People play Mixolydian, which is more of it's a dominant chord, right? Well, the deal is here is like if there was an E chord in the background here, and you played the A and a B, well, there's no way that could be Mixolydian mode right there, because the A chord and the B chord isn't found in that E chord. Okay, if you're playing E Mixolydian, right off the bat, that's going to be a 5 chord of something. And you have to do a little bit of thinking here for that. But really, when you play an E dominant chord like that, you're in the key of A. I mean, in the back of your head, you want to know that harmonically, that you're going to be in the key of A right there. So if I was to do the 1, 4, 5 chord of A, you have A, B, C, D, and E. So you have A would be the 1, D would be a 4, and E would be a 5. So really it's a 5 chord of something when you think of this E dominant chord. You don't want to think really too much about that, but you want to know you're in E But harmonically, to get this sound, which is the, that sound, which is not an E major Ionian sound that we just did. It's more of a bluesier sound. It's a dominant sound, right? You got to know that, well, the parent key is A, D, and E. So if I did the same type of thing, it would be over an E chord, over that same E loop, we would have the 4 and the 5 chord of A. So it would be a D and an E. Back to an E. A T. Got to give credit to Frank Gambale for the idea of this. There's a great video called Modes No More Mystery. You could even check that out online on YouTube. There's free clips in there. Actually, I bought the DVD. I loved it so much. I never watched it because I got the idea of it from just watching on YouTube, but I supported the cause and I went ahead and bought the DVD. And but I would recommend checking that out too. Frank Gambale, great, amazing guitar player. If I wanted to play like a Lydian sound, right? You hear Lydian a lot, right? If I was to switch this E chord to be a Lydian sound, well, I know that the parent key of an E Lydian, it would be a B. Right there, okay? So B is the home key of E Lydian, right there. So if I thought of B, well, what is the 4 and the 5 of B? Well, the 4 of B is E, and the 5 is F sharp. So if I play the E chord on this loop, and I droned an E chord, and an F sharp chord, I'm going to get the sound of Lydian. If you were in the key of C, you have a 1, 4, 5, C, F, and G, right? There's a 1, 4, 5 in every key. Like if you're in the key of C, you know that it's C, it's an F, and a G. Right, so you know that sound. So every key has it. And the reason why I'm thinking about 1, 4, 5s is because when you play different modes, you're really shifting the key. You're playing in parallel with each other. So take that same idea, go back to E. You have an E, you have an A, and a B. That's the 1, 4, 5. Now when I went to the next mode, Dorian, the E Dorian is really the second mode. Okay? If you can remember this for a second, you have the in the E major scale. If I started on F, the second note of E major, and I played those notes of the E major scale, it would sound like this. That's a F sharp Dorian mode, but really I'm still playing an E, right? That's the whole thing. Still playing an E. Like if I play that E chord like this E major chord, and I played from F sharp to F sharp, it would sound like this. I mean, it sounds pretty cool. I'm starting on the second degree, but it's the same sound as major, E major. Right? Or this. I mean, it's still the same exact scale. So having said that, we want to hear what Dorian really sounds like. So I'm going to play an E Dorian. If F sharp was the second mode of E here, well then E is going to be the second degree of what? Of D. Dorian's always 2. Think of it as 2. Well, 2 of what? Well, E, Dorian, we want that sound. It's E is 2. Okay, if E is 2, then what's 1? D. You're just going down the alphabet. So D is 1, E is 2, and so on and so on. So E is going to be the same notes as the D major scale. So if I play D major, but I started on the F sharp or the E, back to D. So the whole idea with this lesson as well is now that we know that it's the key of D, we want to know what the D is the parent key. What's the 4 and 5 of D? D, E, F, G. G is the 4 chord, and A is the 5 chord. If I play a G chord and an A chord over this E minor chord, it's going to sound like Dorian. Because I'm playing the D, I'm playing the key of D by playing this D, the G, which is the 4 of that. And while I have this E droning, the E, the bass kind of rules, right? Whatever the bass is doing. I think Sting said that best, is the bass is rules everything. It's not a E until the bass plays an E, right? It's got the E here. So if I, here, like a real New Yorker. G chord, A chord. Over the E minor. Because this highlights the chord, the notes of Dorian. Check it out, over this E minor chord. Here's an E minor. Even though it's E minor, I'm thinking in my head D major. Why? Because E, Dorian is always going to be the 2, right? Well, what's a 1? D. Simple as that. E, 2, and 2. Go back in the alphabet. I know I keep reiterating this, but I really want you to understand this. D is 1. Okay, so if D is the 1, what does it sound like? A D over an E minor. Well, it is what it is. What do you think? There's a D over an E. A lot of people play that together. There's a D back to an E. But I'll take the 4 and the 5 of D. So what is that again? D, E, F, G. And these are all major triads. 1, 4, 5. So here's a G triad. And then an A. Back to an E minor. If we wanted to play Phrygian, we'll say this. E is Phrygian. We have to circle back. Phrygian is always 3, right? Well, what's the third note? If E is the third note of a major scale, what is it? It's C. Going up the C major scale. E is the third note of C, right? So, we know that just like E was the second note in D major. That's how we figured out the Dorian of D. Well, now we want to figure out the third. Phrygian is always the 3, right? So the 3 is of C. So now C is the parent key. If I want to do a 1, 4, 5 in C, C, F, G. But at the same time, I have my E. Because Phrygian is a minor. If you're going to play a Phrygian mode, it's a minor. It's always that way. You have the C, F, G. But, we're in E minor. Because the 3 chord is a minor chord. All the way around. E, the minor third, the 5th, it's a straight E minor triad. Now you want to get to the sound. What's the sound of Phrygian? Well, by knowing what the 4 and 5 chords are, and the parent key, you could determine that. Over an E minor. You can even hear that. Check it out. So if I hear this E minor going, and you're like, well, you know what? The band's playing E minor. Am I stuck to just playing, E minor? E minor pentatonic? Well, no, you're not. because that's the sound of E minor, yes. And you could play that E Phrygian. But if you want a Phrygian sound, well, think for a second. Okay, we're C. You have a C chord in there. Then you have the 4, which is F. Okay. Wow. And G. Now you have that F chord over the E minor. How's that sound, right? Let's see what it sounds like. Check it out. E minor. You know, we did some of the Lydian already. Lydian, we figured out, well, Lydian's always the 4. Just remember this. In the modes, the church modes, major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Then you have, each mode has like the 1 Ionian, 2 Dorian, 3 Lydian. This is good to know. I mean, 3 Phrygian, 4 Lydian, 5 Mixolydian, 6 Aeolian, 7 Locrian, and back to 8, which is 1. So we figured out that E is Lydian is 4. So what is 4? What's the 4th degree of a major scale? And here's the twist in your mind to figure out what your parent key is. And that should have been what the title of this video is, actually. How do you find the parent key? Maybe I'll switch that when I edit this. So you have, if E is the 4th chord of what? It's like a joke, a brain teaser, right? Well, here's E, here's the note. That's the 4th of what? Like the straight 4th. Well, if you know your intervals visually, then here, that's the 4th. B. So B, that's the 4th. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the B major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I keep in mind this E over this B scale, if I played it all the way through, but starting on the E, I have this. And that's how I have that sound, that Lydian sound. So I take the B key of B. Well, here's the parent key. What's the 4 and the 5? Well, the 4 we discovered already is the E, and the 5 is the F sharp. We did that already. Okay. Over B. So we know that we want to play E Lydian, right? So E is our foundation now. E, it's also a major chord, but we're in the key of B, really. So there's the 4 chord, F sharp, there's the 5 chord. So over that E, I'm going to let that ring out. And you have, so here's the E down here, triads. E, F sharp. And that's how we got that sound over major, like this. Now, without even really soloing there, it's a great, great, great thing because you're establishing the sound. And you know that it's going to be the notes of the B major scale, but you're in E. So ultimately, you want to think E Lydian. So if you're thinking, well, here's those chords, the E and the F, and you can think of your E Lydian scale within that and use those as like target notes, because that's really the beauty of this as well, is knowing that you have an E chord ringing, and here's the E triad, F sharp triad. What are these notes doing to the E major chord? Well, F, that's going to be a 9th over that. It's like this. Now what about this one? The C sharp, which is the 5th of F sharp. What does that do? It's a 6th degree of E. Because I remember when I play this chord, it's rubbing against these notes right there. So these notes are all rubbing against these notes together. So this note is rubbing, so it's going to sound like this. So it's like a 6 chord, a 6th E, 6 or 13, whatever you want to say it. So you have that sound. And then one more, you have this one. And that's really the sound that's giving it that Lydian. Just like that. So if you just did that, that would give you a sound of Lydian. I'm seeing how these chords work over each other and what they're doing to each other, because that's ultimately what's happening. If somebody's playing an E chord and you want the Lydian sound, all you got to do is play an F sharp over it. And everyone knows that's Lydian now. When we did Mixolydian a little bit, we heard the D over there. We established that was A was the key. Because if E is now Mixolydian, so E is 5. Well, what is 5 exactly? Well, here's E. E, if I know my intervals right, well here's the shape. Here's 5. A, key of A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, E. So E is the 5th note in the A major scale. If I played it like this, starting with the E, it would sound like this. Whoops. That's how you have that. That's the sound of Mixolydian, right? But really it's key of A. So A, the 4 is D, and E. So if I had an E major chord, and I play a D chord under it, it's going to sound like this. A lot of songs are like that, you know. Right? Aeolian, we established, was the 6th degree. So what is that? The 6th. If the E note is the 6th degree of a major scale, what is it? Well, I know by my shapes, intervals, that it's G. Check it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's G major scale. E is the 6th of G. So if we're playing E minor, we know that Aeolian is a minor. You have to know that. It's the 6th chord is a minor. Well, if you have G is the parent key, well, what's the 4 and the 5? Well, C and D. So over that minor chord, we played a C and a D. Check it out. There's a C. There's a D. E. C. D. E. C. D. My guitar course here. It's called the Essential Skills Collection for Guitar. Check it out. It's in the link, top of the description right here. I go over 4 important topics. Fretboard memorization. That's how I'm really quickly able to locate all the intervals. Simple way. Then we also talk about the circle of fifths. We talk about blues soloing, and I go over this thing about with the cage system and chord progression. So it's really great. Spent a lot of time creating that. It's in the description. I would appreciate it. Please check it out. Remember, be cool, be kind, and be cherry. And if you want to see another video I created on the major scale modes and 3 notes per string up the neck, check that out right up there. And I love yous, and I'll catch you in the next one. Have a great day. Peace, y'all.